it exists. We're now approaching the 20th anniversary of the fall of the Berlin Wall, unification of Germany, first steps in the collapse of the Soviet Union. Now, the alleged reason for NATO's existence was to protect the West against a Russian assault. You can believe what you like about the reason, but that was the reason. By 1989, that reason was gone. So why is there NATO? Well, that question did arise. Mikhail Gorbachev offered at that time to the United States, which runs NATO, that he would permit a unified Germany to join NATO, a hostile military alliance aimed at the Soviet Union. Now, that's a remarkable concession. If you look back at the history of the 20th century, Germany alone had practically destroyed Russia several times. And now he was offering to let a reunited, militarized Germany join a hostile military alliance backed by the most awesome military power in history. Well, there was a quid pro quo. George Bush I was then president, James Baker, Secretary of State, and they agreed, in their words, that NATO would not expand 1 inch to the east, which would at least give Russia some breathing room. Now, Gorbachev also proposed a nuclear weapons-free zone from the Arctic to the Mediterranean, which would have, again, given some protection and, in fact, security for peace. Well, that was just rejected. I don't even think it was answered. Well, that's where things stood in 1989, 90. Then Bill Clinton was elected. And one of his first acts was to break the promise and expand NATO to the east, which, of course, is a threat to Russian security. Now, the pretext given, for example, by his Stroh Talbot, who was the Undersecretary of State for Eastern Europe, is that that was necessary to bring the former satellites into the European Union. But that can't be. There are states inside the European Union that are not part of NATO. Austria, Finland, Sweden, so that's irrelevant. But it was a threat, and Russia, of course, reacted to the hostile threat. It increased tension. Well, going up to the present, President Obama's National Security Advisor, James Jones, has been a strong advocate of the view that NATO should expand further to the east and to the south, and that, in fact, it should, to the east and to the south means to control the energy-producing regions. The head of NATO, Dutch Secretary of General De Hoop Scheffer, has proposed, advocates that NATO should take the responsibility for protecting energy supplies to the West, pipelines, sea lanes, and so on. Well, now we're getting to Afghanistan, which is right in the, has always been of great geostrategic importance because of its location. Now more than ever because of its location relative to the energy-producing regions in the Gulf region and in Central Asia. So yes, that's what we're seeing. Actually, there's more to say about NATO, about why it exists. So we might look back, say, 10 years to the 50th anniversary. Well, the 50th anniversary of NATO was a gloomy affair. There was, right at that time, NATO was bombing Serbia, illegally, as everyone admitted, claiming it was necessary for humanitarian reasons. That was at the NATO summit, there was much agonizing about how we cannot tolerate atrocities so near Europe. Well, that was an interesting comment, since at that time, NATO was supporting atrocities right inside NATO. Turkey, for example, was carrying out, with massive U.S. aid, huge atrocities against its Kurdish population, far worse than anything reported in Kosovo. Right at that time in East Timor, you're not going to praise yourself, so if you don't mind, I will. At the time of the Dili massacre, which you and Alan heroically exposed, atrocities continued. And in fact, in early 1999, they were picking up again with strong U.S. support. Again, far beyond anything reported in Kosovo. That's the U.S. and Britain, the core of NATO, right at the same time. In fact, Dennis Blair, President Obama, inside President Obama's national security circle, he was sent to Indonesia, theoretically, to try to get the Indonesian army to stop carrying out the mounting atrocities. But he supported them. He met with the top Indonesian general, General Wiranto, and essentially said, go ahead. And they did. And in fact, those atrocities could have been stopped at any moment. That was demonstrated in September 1999, when Bill Clinton, under very extensive domestic and international pressure, finally decided to call it off. He didn't have to bomb Jakarta. He didn't have to impose an embargo. He just told the Indonesian generals the game's over, and they immediately withdrew. That goes down in history as a great humanitarian intervention. That's not exactly the right story. Right up until then, the United States was continuing to support the atrocities. Britain, under its new ethical foreign policy, didn't quite get in on time, and they kept supporting them even after the Australian-led UN peacekeeping force entered. Well, that's NATO 10 years ago. It's even putting aside the claims about Serbia, which maybe a word about those are worthwhile. We know what happened in Serbia. There's a massive, in Kosovo, there's massive documentation from the State Department, from NATO, European Union observers on the ground. There was a level of atrocities sort of distributed between the guerrillas and the Serbs, but it was expected that the NATO bombing would radically increase the atrocities, which it did. If you look back at the Milosevic indictment in the middle of the bombing, almost entirely about atrocities, except for one exception, about atrocities after the NATO bombing. That's what they anticipated. General Clark, commanding general, had informed Washington weeks earlier, yes, that would be the consequence. He informed the press of that as the bombing started. That was the humanitarian intervention, while NATO was supporting even worse atrocities, right within NATO, in East Timor, and go on in other cases. Well, that's NATO 10 years ago. And it begins to tell us what NATO is for. Is it for defending Europe from attack? In fact, there is such a pretense now. So when President Bush started installing missile defense systems in Eastern Europe, the claim was, well, this is to defend Europe from attack against Iranian nuclear-tipped missiles. In fact, that doesn't have any, doesn't matter. And the fact that if it had any, it would be total insanity for them to even arm one, because the country would be vaporized in 30 seconds. And it's a threat to Russia again, just like Clinton's expansion of NATO to the east.
France joining?
Pardon?
France joining now, rejoining?
France joining is quite interesting. I mean, France had a policy initiated by General de Gaulle of trying to turn Europe into what was then called a third force, independent of the two superpowers. So Europe should pursue an independent course. It was, he spoke of Europe from the Atlantic to the Urals. That was a great fear of the United States since the Second World War, that Europe would strike out on its own after reconstructing, which it could. The economies on the scale of the United States, no reason, except in military force, it's comparable to the United States. So it could have been a move towards a peaceful Europe, independent of the superpowers. In fact, a large part of the purpose of NATO was to prevent that from happening, to ensure that Europe would stay within the U.S. umbrella, under U.S. control. Well, France has now abandoned that position and has rejoined what is now just an intervention force, an international intervention force, exactly as James Jones and Hoopcheffer and others portray it. It's an international intervention force under U.S. command. Why should it exist? In fact, if you go back to 1989 and 1990, it's extremely interesting to see how the United States reacted to the collapse of the Soviet Union. So right after the fall of the Berlin Wall, which 20 years ago, which signaled the end of the Soviet Union clearly, the Bush administration, Bush 1, immediately released a national security strategy, military budget, and so on, which are very interesting reading. What they say, in effect, is everything's going to go on exactly as before, but with new pretexts. So now we have to have a huge military establishment and military budget, and not to protect ourselves from the Russians who are collapsing, but because, literally, because of the technological sophistication of third world powers. Now that was promulgated without ridicule. You know, if someone was watching from Mars, they'd collapse in laughter. So because of the technological sophistication of third world powers, we have to keep this huge military budget. We have to keep intervention forces aimed at the Middle East, the main target of intervention. Why? Not because of the Russians. It said, as had been claimed, what it said was we have to direct the intervention forces to the Middle East, where our problems could not be laid at the Kremlin's door. So in other words, we've been lying to you for 50 years, but now the clouds have lifted, so we just have to have intervention forces aimed at the Middle East, because we have to control it. We have to maintain what they called the defense industrial base. That's a euphemism for high technology industry. That's why you have things like computers and the internet and so on. So that's the massive state sector of the high-tech economy. We have to maintain that, again, because of the threat of the third world and so on. In other words, everything remains the same. The pretexts change. That passed without a whisper.
Noam Chomsky,
Roger that. We have no personnel east of our position, so you are free to engage over.
Alright, we'll be engaging. Roger, go ahead. I can't get them down because they're behind that building.
Anybody been building?
We got an RPG. Alright, we got a guy with an RPG. How much fire? Okay, let's come around. We got to go from our point of view. Can you ready to fire? Yeah, we got a guy shooting. Now he's behind the building. God damn it.
Next, he was right in front of the Brad, about there at 1 o'clock. Haven't seen anything since then.
Just fucking, once you get on, just open off. Roger.
I see your element got about 400 meters out along this.
You're clear. Alright, firing.
With the state line, let me know when you get it.
We'll shoot. Light them all up. Come on, fire.
Yeah, Roger.
Keep shooting. all 8 individuals. Yeah, we got 2 emergency. We're still firing. Roger. Got him.
6 is a 2-6. We'll move, but we got this.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well,
Bypass.
God damn it, Kyle. I'm sorry. I hit him. I hit. All right, you're clear. I'm just trying to find targets again.
Bushmaster 6, this is Bushmaster 2-6.
Got a bunch of bodies laying there. All right, we got about 8 individuals. Yeah, we got one guy crawling around down there, but yeah, we got now. We're shooting some more. Hey, you shoot, I'll talk. Hotel 26, Crazy Horse 18.
Crazy Horse 18, this is Hotel 26, over.
Roger, currently engaging approximately 8 individuals, KIA, RPGs, and AK-47s.
Hotel 26, you need to move to that location once Crazy Horse is done and get pictures, over.
Sergeant 20 is the location. Hotel 26, Crazy Horse 18. Oh yeah, look at those dead bastards. Nice. 26, Crazy Horse 18. Nice. Good shoot. Thank you.
Hotel 26.
Hotel 26, Crazy Horse 18.
Crazy Horse 18, Bushmaster 7, go ahead.
Yeah, Bushmaster 7, Crazy Horse 18. Location of bodies, Mike Bravo, 5458 8617. Hey, good on the region.
5458-8617, over.
It's Crazy Horse 18, that's a good copy. They're on a street in front of an open courtyard with a bunch of blue trucks, a bunch of vehicles in the courtyard. There's one guy moving down there, but he's wounded.
Courtyard to the south.
Alright, we'll let him know so they can hurry up, get over here. 18, we also have one individual, appears to be wounded, trying to crawl away.
Roger, we're going to move down there.
Roger, we'll cease fire. We won't shoot anymore. He's getting up. If he has a weapon on his hand? No, I haven't seen one yet. You guys got that guy crawling right now on the curb? Yeah, I got him. I can be around in here a minute. You guys are shooting over there too, so we'll see. Yeah, roger that.
Bushmaster 36 Elements, this is Hotel 27, over. Hotel 27, Bushmaster 7, go ahead. Roger, I'm just trying to make sure that you guys have my turbo, over.
Roger, yes, sir. Come on, buddy. I gotta just pick up a weapon.
Crazy Horse, this is Bushmaster 5. So Bushmaster 4, break. Here, right below you, right time now. Can you walk us onto that location, over?
This is 26, Roger. I'm players. We also have one individual moving. We're looking for weapons. If we see a weapon, we're going to engage. Now, Bushmaster, we have a van that's approaching and picking up the bodies. Where's that van at? Right down there by the body. Okay, yeah. Bushmaster, Crazy Horse, we have individuals going to the scene. Looks like possibly picking up bodies and weapons. Let me engage.
Hey, we need to stop that. We get down there. We shoot. You see my look?
Roger. Stop break. Crazy Horse 1, 8. Request permission to engage. We're picking up the wounded. Yeah, we're trying to get permission to engage. Come on, let us shoot. Bushmaster, Crazy Horse 18. We're taking him. Bushmaster, Crazy Horse 18.
It's Bushmaster 7, go ahead.
Roger, we have a black our bongo truck picking up the bodies. Request permission to engage.
Bushmaster 7, Roger. This is Bushmaster 7, Roger, engage.
18, engage. Clear. Come on. Clear. Clear. More engaged. Coming around, clear. Roger. Trying to, Clear. I lost him in the I got him. I'm firing.
George, this is Bushmaster 4. You got any BDA on that truck, over?
You're clear. This is Crazy Horse, stand by. I'm shooting for some reason. Go ahead. Command's disabled. Let's shoot it. I got an azimuth limit for some reason. Left. Clear left. Alright, Bushmaster, Crazy Horse 18. The vehicle appears to be disabled. There was approximately 4 to 5 individuals in vehicle moving bodies. Your lead, Bradley, should take the next right. That's cruising east down the road. No more shooting.
Crazy Horse, this is Bushmaster 4. We're moving to dismount element straight south from the Bradley.
I have your Bradley element turning south down the road where the engagements were. Left calling stations at Bradley element taken. Roger's Crazy Horse, your lead Bradley just turned south down the road where all the engagements happen. Should have a van in the middle of the road with about 12 to 15 bodies. Oh yeah, look at that, right through the windshield. Alright, there was 5 individuals in that truck, so I'm counting about 12 to 15. That's a fairly accurate assessment so far. Roger that.
1 to 5 6 is, Brooklyn 6 getting. Radio?
Yes, my facility running zone 208 for zone 4 with low frequency. I just drove over a body. Yeah.
Micro 52report free change zone 4.
Maybe there's a visual frequency. I just drove over a body. Yeah.
Micro 52report free change zone 4.
Hey, I need to get the brass to drop ramps. I got a wounded girl. We need to take her up the mile. Bushmaster 7 Hotel 26, do you want us to move to your location? Over.
Spectator, you Spirit 02 flying for change zone 1.
02 free change cruise zone 1.
Bushmaster 6, Hotel 26, over. Hotel 26, this is Bushmaster 7. Roger, come to our location. Okay, Roger, we're moving up north on Gaddens, and then we will push east to your location.
Zone 4 in route zone 311, we'll call arrival.
Aggressive 20, command to 800, active for arrival 311.
20.
Magnet radio, aggressive 34 is off zone 208 for zone 1, call for change.
Aggressive 43, zone, correction, aggressive 34, zone 30 is closed, report free change zone 1.
Aggressive 34, welcome.
Roger.
Roger, that's a negative on evac the two civilian kids to Rusty. They're going to have the IPs link up with us over here, break. IPs will take them to a local hospital, over. That's your copy, over. Lights down.
No, it's their fault for bringing their kids to a battle. That's right.
It was whispered by slaves and abolitionists as they blazed the trail towards freedom through the darkness of night. Yes, we can. It was sung by immigrants as they struck out from distant shores.
Roger. Break. Crazy Horse 1-8. Request permission to engage. I'm picking up the wounded. Yeah, we're trying to get permission to engage. Come on, let us shoot. Bushmaster, Crazy Horse 1-8.
Women who reached for the ballot.
We're taking him.
The president who chose the ballot.
Bushmaster, Crazy Horse 1-8.
And a king who took us to the mountaintop and pointed the way to the promised land. Yes, we can to justice and equality.